So we really haven't been doing science for about 70 years now. It's scientism. The problem is that people are looking to scientists, doctors as these authority figures, even though they're not. Nobody can have authority over your health but yourself, because nobody is living your experience in your body. Aging is actually simply just a reflection of mitochondrial heteroplasmy. There are ways to slow that down, and there are certainly ways to speed that up, and basically the way that modern humans are living are like the exact wrong things that we should be doing if we care about mitochondrial health. There's not profits in telling people to go outside and get their bare feet on the ground and eat a seasonal diet and move their bodies and all of these things. Like, you can't monetize that, and so the incentive structures in place are preventing people from getting access to the information and researchers from doing the research that actually needs to be done. People are sicker than ever. They're unfulfilled, unhappy, and it's just time to reclaim our own authority over our bodies and make life amazing, because it is a very magical and miraculous experience that we're having.
And the Bitcoin there, beautiful.
It's like I'm all in.
Your life is never the same from that point on, huh?
Everything changed. We actually got into Bitcoin back in 2018, kind of dabbling in it, but never diving into the technology of it and really understanding it. I'm actually taking a cryptography course right now because I really want to understand it. I will take something at its face from somebody, right? But I really want to understand why what they're saying is true.
Hello and welcome to another episode of You're the Voice. I am super excited to be here with you today because I have a very special guest, Dr. Alexis Cowan. Jasmine or Cowan? What do you prefer? Or both?
Jasmine's my middle name. My last name is Cowan. A lot of people will say Cowan, but it's fine. So
Cowan.
You can call me Dr. Alexis Cowan. It's fine.
All right. So Doc, so good to have you here. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved when we connected in Prague at Bitcoin Prague, and I feel like this has been a long time coming, so I'm excited to chat with you.
Absolutely. So we did, for those who don't know, we did a panel together in BTC Prague 6 months ago. The recording, I'm going to put it in the show notes because it was such a good panel. And Alexis stepped in last minute. We literally dragged you in from the audience because Dr. Jessica Rose couldn't make it. And we had the seat, and Ralphie, my friend, came up with the idea. She's like, can we have Alexis there? I'm like, yes, brilliant. So we didn't even ask for permission from the organizers. We literally just snatched the stage and brought you in. And it was so good. You were so great. And people will get to see this panel because it was just really, really great.
It's kind of better in a way that it happened that way, because then I couldn't get in my head at all. I was like, I'm just doing this.
Exactly. No fear of preparation or anything. Right. You just did it. And Jack was next to you, and Tristan and Kevin, and all of them. So the dynamism was really good. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So for my audience that don't know you, I'm just quickly going to introduce you. So Dr. Alexis Cowan, PhD, is a Princeton-trained molecular biologist specializing in metabolism, gut health, and circadian biology. After overcoming her own chronic health struggles, including childhood illnesses, weight issues, and colitis, she shifted from academic research to helping others rebuild health through nutrition, movement, mitochondrial function, and light exposure. Today, she blends rigorous science with practical lifestyle strategies, coaching clients to understand their biology and take ownership of their well-being. And I love the work you do. I've been following you for a while, I think about a year now or so. And it's just incredible the amount of knowledge you have and how smart you are. And you're just such a genius. And when I listen to you, I think you were one of the only people that I listen to on YouTube that I have to slow down the pace rather than accelerate.
Wow, that's an honor.
0.75 because I had to catch everything you say, and you speak a little bit fast.
I do. It's Jersey in me.
Yes. So I was slowing it down, and you were the first person I've done it with. But I was just so eager. I am so eager to drink every word you say. So I think it's amazing. So the fact that you came on my show is just really humbling, and thank you for much.
Oh my
Thank you
gosh,
very much.
of course. I'm happy to be here. I'm really not as great as you say. So let's set
You are.
expectations for your audience. I
No, no,
don't
no,
want
no,
the
no.
bar to be too
You
high.
are, and my audience knows that I'm picking the best guests for my show. So you
Okay,
have
that's
fun.
fair.
So first of all, you have this wild dance moves lately. Are you dancing?
Oh
What's
my
going
gosh, I've
on?
been dancing like 20 hours a week.
Tell me.
Salsa and bachata, a little bit of merengue. I actually also learned foxtrot and hustle last weekend as well. I'm having the time of my life. Also,
Where
I'm
did that
really
come
excited to
from?
like make. Well, so I have a few friends that are very into dance that have been trying to like reel me in for a while, and I just felt like the timing. I don't know. I felt like I had the energy to do it, and so I started taking lessons, privates, and then group classes, and going to socials, and just like immersing myself fully into this experience. And honestly, it's been one of the most challenging and rewarding endeavors that I've ever embarked upon. And I say that having obviously gone through a PhD and everything, but nothing has made my brain work in this way before. I literally feel like my neural connections expanding while I'm dancing, because it's also requiring a different aspect, especially as a follow, right? Because you need to let somebody else kind of guide you of where you
Yeah.
need to go. So it's just a totally different dynamic than what I'm used to, because honestly, I was raised by two very independent women, my grandma and my mom, and like didn't really have a strong male role model in my life. So I feel like it's been so rewarding for me to be able to be led. It's just very, very
Yes.
interesting. Like it's a totally different dynamic than what I'm used to. And I'm just like, yeah, having the time of my life right now. And I think it's biologically, I'm going to start talking about the science like behind why it's good for human health, but social dancing is just, it's not only good exercise, it's connection, it's an ability to, move energy, it's an ability to be creative and express yourself. Like there's so many beneficial aspects to dancing in particular, but also social dancing specifically that I think, nobody really talks about, but I would like to start talking about it. So I'm going to start talking
I
about it
think
here.
you should. You should. Absolutely. I've been dancing from the age of 4 till 20. I
Wow.
did ballet and modern, and
Oh,
I loved it. And I always loved dancing, but I've
yeah.
never done what you're doing now, like as an adult, taking like
It's
dancing classes and stuff.
amazing.
But just, whenever I come back to a dancing opportunity or situation, my body remembers stuff. Like
Yes.
this is 25 years after I stopped dancing, and my body just remembers. Some now that I do my morning exercises every morning that I get up. Now I get up for sunrise, so I get to do it in sunrise.
Woo.
The body remembers even in classic ballet, you have the whole set of like posts,
Yes.
positions, like first, second, third. My body remembers everything. Like I couldn't believe it. I'm doing everything I used to do on the bar when I
Wow.
was 8, 10, 12, 15, and I never practice it. It's just the body has this memory
Mm-hmm.
of movement, of posture, of like you say, of dynamism, of leading, of we don't understand what kind of miraculous machine this is. This is incredible. And the more I learn, the more I am in awe. And the
Mm-hmm.
more it brings me back to God, because I'm like, who else could have created such a machine?
I
This
totally
is
agree.
incredible, right?
Yeah, it's miraculous, and I think anybody who explores biology through and like human health through a more like reductionist lens is just missing out on so much magic in life. And like you can talk about things in that reductionist way, and it's helpful because I mean words are inherently limiting, right? So like if you're going to put words to something, you're going to reduce it down to something less than what it is in its totality. But there's just so much magic to life. And I think as scientists, scientists back in the day used to be deeply spiritual, often religious, and very interested in the mysteries of life and even in the occult and like understanding things at a fundamental level because they were curiosity driven. Today, science is all about the grind and getting, the grant funding so that you can do the niche project that the funding agencies want to fund. And it's just picking these little parts, like these little pathways to see what you can hack with a drug, etc., vaccine, etc., so that you can get a specific outcome. And it's like totally missing the point of what science is supposed to be, which is supposed to be like this curious exploration of the nature of reality and not this industrial complex. So we really haven't been doing science for about 70 years now. It's scientism. a lot of people will
Yes.
call it. And that's, it's a major flaw. And the problem is that people are looking to scientists, doctors as these authority figures, even though they're not. Nobody can have authority over your health but yourself, because nobody is living your experience in your body. Nobody can know your body and your physiology the way that you do. And to outsource that authority is very dangerous, because, we see the outcome of it. People are sicker than ever. They're unfulfilled, unhappy, and it's just time to reclaim our own authority over our bodies and, make life amazing, because it is a very magical and miraculous experience that we're having.
And why did you take that route to health in the first place? What led you there?
Yeah, so what you mentioned in my bio about my childhood issues, there was a lot. So I was basically forced to kind of confront the standard medical model at literally 2 years old. I had this major oral dental surgery situation. To this day, I still don't know exactly what was wrong, but it was 4 hours of me strapped into a chair with my jaw mechanically cranked open. And I remember it. I literally had PTSD through my late 20s from this experience. Traumatic beyond belief. And so that was my first experience with modern medicine. I was I want nothing to do with this. And then after that, in first grade, I got chronic recurring strep throat, was just put on antibiotics for months at a time. And I kept getting sick. So my mom ended up pulling me out of school, homeschooling me for a year. And during that year, my weight just exploded. And when I went back to school in third grade, I weighed double my classmates. And that continued up through junior year of high school. I maxed out somewhere around 270 pounds and was just constantly having respiratory issues, skin issues, dysmenorrhea, just not feeling good in my body. And so I decided at the time, what I knew was kind of limited to diet and exercise, right? So I joined a gym. I started counting calories, and I lost 100 pounds over the course of a year. And that was my senior year of high school. And so that experience kind of showed me that I can do things to help myself. I don't necessarily need anybody else to help me out with that, though there were, of course, issues that come with very strict calorie counting. And at the time I was eating a lot of processed foods rather. And so it's easy to count calories with those because the label's right there. And then I had to deal with an eating disorder and IBS that happened after that. But those were all just additional initiations into understanding my body, getting interested in science and research to try to understand how I can help myself. And by extension, got me very curious to, study science in general and go back to school and get my PhD and do research in a lab and understand that whole world, but then come back and try to apply it for my own life, and then ultimately use that wisdom to help other people also navigate their health issues. So it really just stemmed back from a personal need to confront these systems and to educate myself, which honestly, in retrospect, I feel is a gift, because when I look at people who don't question the standard medical model, oftentimes they have not been confronted with something life-threatening or catastrophic. And I love that for them. But at the same time, it's also very good to be able to wake up to these issues so that you can do your best to start to create a new paradigm, which is what I'm trying to do now.
And at what point did you decide to shift from the academia, the academic research, to health consulting and public education?
Yeah, so I think around the latter half of my PhD, I kind of was undergoing this realization that I really didn't want to have a boss. And I really am just kind of painfully independent. I just want to do my own thing. I don't want to have this constriction of what I need to do and what I'm supposed to do. And the collaborative aspect I loved, but I really just wanted to kind of start my own business. And so I had actually never even intended to go into academia, really. I just had kind of a series of fortunate events in undergrad and mentors that kind of helped pave a way for me to be able to pursue these things. But I never really had the goal of I'm going to get my PhD and then I'm going to do a postdoc and then I'm going to go be a professor at some prestigious academic institution. That was never kind of interest to me. I really don't like going on pre-paved paths. I really like to kind of chart my own. And so I ended up actually going back for a postdoc at UPenn for a year in 2023. But actually during that time is when I fell down the rabbit hole in quantum biology and found Dr. Jack Kruse's work in April of 2023. And my entire world shattered. And I was like, how did I not know any of this? This is amazing. It makes so much sense. It's so intuitive. I need to dedicate my life to this. And so I was basically gradually phasing out of my postdoc. I ended it on the early side. Usually postdocs can go quite a few years, but because I didn't have an intention to go back and get a standard faculty position, I didn't really need that experience on my resume. And so I just decided to go, full steam ahead, studying quantum and circadian and light biology and applying it to myself, feeling incredible differences in literally the span of a couple of days, and then being all in and just wanting to help educate the world on these topics, because we've strayed so far from what nature and God intended that even just adding small amounts of these approaches into your lifestyle can make a world of difference.
I love it. And I assume that once you meet someone like Jack, not only that you become even more sovereign and not want to go back to one of those centralized systems, but he also orange pills you.
Exactly. It's like I'm all in. I don't know if you'd less than free, but
that's it.
there's
Your
a
life
Bitcoin.
never, the Bitcoin there, beautiful. Your life is never the same from that point on, huh?
Nope. Everything
Amazing.
changed. We actually got into Bitcoin back in 2018, kind of dabbling in it, but never diving into the technology of it and really understanding it. I'm actually taking a cryptography course right now because I
Oh my God.
really want to understand it.
You're wild. Of course, if anyone can do it, it's you. Why not? Take a cryptography course. Go on, yeah.
I just feel like whenever I am encountering new information, I will take something at its face from somebody, right? But like, I really want to understand why what they're saying is true. And so I just need to go through the proof of work myself, right?
You verified.
And verify it instead of trusting, exactly.
You verified, girl, but you did it the right way. It's incredible. All right, we'll come back to Bitcoin. So
great.
We'll leave it aside for a sec, but let's talk about mitochondrial function and light exposure. So, and by the way, I put my post up on Instagram asking my followers if they have some questions for you, and some of them had some really good questions, so I'll weave them in too.
Great.
Mitochondria is a battery, I heard you explain in one of your interviews. Can you share a brief explanation of why mitochondria is so important and what modern science is missing here? Why is there not more focus on it?
Sure. So the mitochondria, people might remember from like high school biology class as the powerhouse of the cell. Mitochondria are in almost every tissue of the body, except for red blood cells, which maybe we'll get into why that makes sense from a first principle standpoint at some point. But for now, let's just say that mitochondria are in every cell of the body. They have their own genome. There's a theory called the endosymbiont theory, which basically states that over the course of evolutionary timescale, a bacterium fused with some single-celled organism, and they created this like symbiotic relationship that resulted in the advent of the eukaryotic cell that has both a membrane-bound nucleus, which is where the nuclear DNA is, which people think about when they're thinking about standard genetics, but also the mitochondria, which comes with its own DNA, and mitochondrial DNA is circular in shape, the same as bacteria. They also have a double membrane system, same as bacteria as well. So there's a lot of this crosstalk between, or similarities rather, between bacteria and mitochondria. And it's also a reason why antibiotic use can be so detrimental, because you can essentially be poisoning your mitochondria at the same time as you're nuking the bacteria that you're trying to target from whatever infection. So these mitochondria and that their health are associated with essentially every chronic disease state that we are seeing in the modern day. So everything from neurodegeneration to cancer to autoimmune disease to obesity and diabetes, all of these diseases are rooted in mitochondrial dysfunction in one or more tissues. And so to backtrack about like why that makes sense and what the mitochondria are up to, as you alluded to, the mitochondria are a battery. And what that means is if you have a battery and a remote control, the way that works, you have a positive and a negative pole. And you're essentially separating positive from negative charge, and that's creating a potential energy that when those charges end up meeting and they kind of circle around and dissipate that energy, they can dissipate it and power whatever thing you're working with, whether it's a remote or a phone or whatever device is using a battery. So similarly, mitochondria, what they're doing is they can take electrons and protons, electrons being units of negative charge, protons being units of positive charge. And they get these electrons and protons from, the food we eat, for example. So carbohydrates, fats, proteins, those units of charge are stripped out of those macronutrients, separated by the mitochondria, And that charge separation is used to power the production of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, which is considered as the chemical potential energy source of the cell, like the primary chemical potential energy source. We're learning now, though, that like there's a lot more to the story, and that there's another battery present within cells in the form of structured water, which we can circle back to as well. But for now, let's just understand that the mitochondria are making the vast majority of ATP within a cell, and that ATP can go on to, power everything from nucleotide production to make new DNA, to metabolism, to differential gene expression, so changing epigenetics, for example. Lots of different things going on in the cell that require this biosynthesis, making fats, making proteins. So the mitochondria are doing a lot. And when they become dysfunctional, you're basically just getting a downward trend in the ability to engage in these processes. And there's something called mitochondrial heteroplasmy that is a readout of how dysfunctional mitochondria is. So all heteroplasmy is if you look at the DNA within mitochondria, you're looking at the levels of mutations present within that DNA. Mm-hmm. And mutations in this DNA are a problem because if you actually look at what mitochondrial DNA encodes, it encodes the proteins that are involved in making that ATP that we talked about. There's something called like these protein complexes, complex 1 through complex 4, that are basically the kind of the train tracks where the electrons flow in order to get to their final destination and power ATP production. So you can imagine if you start mutating the DNA that's making these protein complexes, it's kind of like taking some of the tracks away. It's making it more difficult for those electrons to traverse. And so it's making energy production more inefficient. It's also impairing the production of metabolic water, because another product of ATP production within the mitochondria is water. But it's not just any old water that you would imagine like drinking out of a glass, but it's a special type of deuterium depleted metabolic water. And we can circle back to deuterium in a little bit, because that's also associated with mitochondrial function, and there's ways to kind of deal with that. But the third primary product of mitochondrial metabolism that we need to also mention are biophotons. So as a byproduct of electron flow through the mitochondria, a ton of light is made. And these photons, these packets of light, are largely in the UV range, and in particular within the UVC range, which is even stronger than the light we get from the sun. So just to kind of refresh people's memory, from sunlight, depending on the time of year, you're getting everything from UVB out through far infrared, and then you have the whole visible spectrum in between there. So UVC is even stronger light going towards X-rays that we don't get from the sun, because our atmosphere basically allows it to reflect back into space, so it doesn't reach the surface of the Earth. So UVC light, very, very, very powerful light, very strong, is being made by not only the mitochondria, but also turns out it's made in the nucleus as well. And this research goes way back initially to the 1920s, and the research of Alexander Gurwitch, who did these onion root experiments. And he basically found out that if you cut an onion in half and put each half basically separated by a piece of regular glass, nothing happens. But if you put a piece of quartz glass in between them, that sprouts start to form on each side of the onion. And he deemed this as mitogenetic radiation. And it turned out that that radiation was actually UVC light being produced as a result of mitosis. So mitosis is the process of cell division. And so that research goes way back, and then more recent researchers, and actually just since then, there's been prominent research in biophotons, including Roland Van Wyck and Fritz Albert Popp, doing incredible work to really characterize the characteristics and the qualities of the photons being produced by the body and the roles that they're playing. And interestingly, we see, for example, in old sick people, if you put what's called a photomultiplier in front of them, which basically takes whatever photons are coming in and amplifies the signal so that you can detect clearly what kind of light is coming from their bodies, that old sick people emit way more light than young healthy people. And the reason that is basically because as you get old or as you get ill, your body becomes more permeable. It's less of a closed system. And as that permeability opens up, you're essentially losing energy to your environment. And Jack talks about this all the time as it relates to diseases like obesity, for example. He says whenever things grow and get really big, like a dying star, they get big and they're losing energy. They're becoming less efficient. And same thing with the aging process. And aging is actually simply just a reflection of mitochondrial heteroplasmy. So that mutation burden. We gain around 10% mutation burden per decade on average. There are ways to slow that down, and there are certainly ways to speed that up. And basically the way that modern humans are living are like the exact wrong things that we should be doing if we care about mitochondrial health. And so this heteroplasmy is creating these mutations that's making mitochondria more inefficient. And if those mitochondria are in the immune cells, for example, or they're in the gut, or they're in the liver, or they're in the brain, like that's where disease is going to manifest first, because that is where we're having deficits in our deuterium depleted metabolic water, our light production, and our energy production. So those are three hits all coming from the same dysfunctional mitochondria, and there are also ways to remediate this. So my favorite aspect of mitochondrial medicine and biology is that it is extremely actionable. And as you kind of teed up in your question, like, why are we not really focusing on this as much? Well, it's actually quite financially advantageous to focus on the nuclear genome versus the mitochondrial genome and mitochondrial biology, because if you can smack someone with a label from early in life saying you have these mutations and this is just something you have to deal with the rest of your life, like you need these drugs, you need these interventions, there's nothing you can do, versus with mitochondrial medicine, it's like, you know, here's where you are currently, and these are all the lifestyle, diet, environmental steps that you can take in order to reverse that damage. Because the beautiful thing about mitochondria is that there are quality control mechanisms that your life directly informs how well those processes work. And we can get into that, but I've been ranting for a while, so let me see if you have.
No, you've been amazing for a while. This is insane. So it goes down to, it's just not worth it for them to promote that research and type of understanding in society, that mitochondrial health is foundational, is critical. I mean, you're quoting here references to research that have been done 100 years ago and 80 and 70 years ago. Why did it stop? Why did it slow down? Just because of the industrial complexes? Just because they understand that this is counterintuitive to making fiat grow, to
I mean,
pharma?
this is like a whole story, because if you look at the history of science, which I have in detail, and I actually just taught a course called Science Silence, where we went way back. We actually went back to like the 1200s and like Charlemagne, and then like worked our way up through World War II. But there's a lot of really shifty stuff going on, in particular around like the 40s and 50s. So Jack tells this history story about General Groves in World War II and how he basically invented this model of siloing scientists via the Manhattan Project in order to get these massive projects completed without any one scientist being the wiser. I think what's his face? Oppenheimer was the only one that was kind of clued in to like the bigger project at large, but most of the scientists were just going on their merry way with their little piece of the pie, not realizing the horror that they were constructing as a totality. And so he really saw that by siloing scientists and keeping them in the dark about what they're actually working towards, that you can get a lot done, you can accomplish a lot. And so after that, there wasn't really an academic journal model when that was happening, but there's this whole story of Robert Maxwell, who is Ghislaine Maxwell's father, who essentially created the academic journal model and set up this specialization and this publish or perish paradigm that we currently see in full blast today in academia, which is like, you know, you have to keep at the forefront, you have to keep publishing to stay ahead of your peers. It's very competitive, it's not very collaborative, and it's very niched down. So there's like, I don't know, hundreds of different journals, maybe even thousands at this point, that you could publish in, that are all in their very unique little specialties. And there's no journals that are really putting all the pieces together and saying like, this is how everything comes together in concert to, you know, work to create the emergent reality that we're experiencing, or the emergent health properties that we're seeing in, you know, various disease states, for example. So this academic journal model really also supported the grant funding model of science, because now you could essentially have these very niche grants for specific types of research and projects that you could disseminate. And it created this hamster wheel whereby researchers feel within the system that they're required to keep getting the grants in order to, get their tenure, keep their positions at the university just to get more grants. And most PIs today are spending around 80% of their time simply writing grants to get more money. They're not mentoring their students. They're not, engaging in collaboration and think tanks, things like this. They're spending all their time writing just to get money. And of course, that money is becoming more and more diluted over time as well due to inflation. And it's also a bit of a scam too, because those grants, a lot of it goes to overhead at the university. And the journal model that Maxwell set up really made this paradigm where the universities subscribe to the journals in order for their faculty members and their researchers to gain access to that research. So he figured out early on that if you can get institutions to buy into these journals, you're going to make way more money than if you get individuals to buy in. And so now, you go to any big university and you can get access to all these journals, and they're behind a paywall. So all of this publicly funded science is behind massive paywalls that the taxpayers are paying for. And so it's just very messed up on many levels. And, a lot of the money is, of course, mismanaged and it's misappropriated, and it's, going to things that aren't even related to the projects at hand. And then the types of projects they're funding, like if we were in a sane world, we would have an agency and a governing body directly committed to studying mitochondrial function and funding projects related to this. Like, it's a no-brainer. We've had this data and this information for decades at this point that this is very important. And the Human Genome Project and the results of that have been a total belly flop, basically. We thought that there were people right before 2000 saying that as soon as we sequence the human genome, we're going to be able to cure every chronic disease state in humans, and we're going to be able to basically, it's kind of the transhumanist ideal. Like, we can engineer the genome, we can create these,
very mechanical,
very mechanical, very reductionist. And that didn't come to fruition. It was a huge flop. And we never pivoted, though. We're kind of still stuck in that paradigm. We didn't see or adapt quickly enough to say, okay, this isn't what we expected to pan out to be. Now let's focus on what really matters as it relates to the mitochondria. But again, there's not profits in telling people to go outside and get their bare feet on the ground and eat a seasonal diet and move their bodies and all of these things. Like, you can't monetize that. And so the incentive structures in place are preventing people from getting access to the information and researchers from doing the research that actually needs to be done.
You're the Voice is brought to you by Trezor, the original Bitcoin hardware wallet company pioneering the development of self-custody for crypto assets since 2013, empowering individuals with an open source device, enabling beginners and experts to easily and securely hold their coins. I find my Trezor super easy to use and recommend it to my friends and family. Enjoy my 5% discount on Trezor products by clicking the link in the show notes and using the code AFLAT. I want to introduce you to Abundant Minds because they take a very different approach to Bitcoin mining. Most people buy Bitcoin, but the smart ones mine it straight into self-custody. With Abundant Minds, you can do it without giving up your privacy. Abundant Minds was founded by Bo and Christine Marie Turner, a couple who lost more than $500,000 to providers making empty promises. Instead of walking away, they built a company that raises the industry standard and puts client first, and that's why I like them. With Abundant Minds, you own your machines. They never touch your Bitcoin, never skim a revenue share, and you choose your own mining pool. Their customer care is unusual. Clients speak to a real person for self-custody education, privacy consulting, and even visiting their site. They serve clients from around the world, but US investors specifically enjoy a big tax benefit and 100% bonus depreciation. This is more than just mining Bitcoin. It's about freedom, privacy, and purpose. You can book a free strategy call, see how it works, and mine some of your first Bitcoin for free with a special offer for my audience. Learn more on abundantminds.com/efrat. Yes, thank you for the reminder. I will put a link to the course of silent science. I went through your website. I saw all the different courses. I'm so excited. I'm going to take one, the one on travel. I'm definitely getting it.
Good.
Of
I'll send
course,
it to you.
I need it, but also there's so many other ones. So I'm going back to light. How does light regulate our mitochondrial biology? And is it true that we can solve so many things by having a good daily habit of exposing ourselves to light, like being less hungry, like sleeping better, like all these things that we so many people struggle with, and they could be simple to solve.
100%. So let's go back to our sunlight spectrum that I mentioned earlier. We have UVB light, which is the shortest wavelength light we receive from the sun. Then we have UVA light, which is slightly longer wavelength. From there, UV stands for ultraviolet. So from ultraviolet, we go to violet, then we go to blue, then we go to green, then we go to yellow, then we go to orange, and then we go to red. After red, we have near infrared, and then we have infrared and far infrared. It's kind of a bit of an arbitrary breakup, but the near infrared light is in particular very important, and we're going to talk about it. But basically, because it can penetrate the most deeply into the body out of any of the light spectrum that we receive from the sun. So in our ancestral landscape, we lived under the sun, right? We didn't have any artificial lights besides fire, which is primarily infrared. The reason fire looks yellow, orange, red is because it's creating a bunch of this long wavelength light. So the UV and the blue end of the range is short wavelength, higher energy. The long wavelength part of the range are our warmer colors, our reds, our oranges. Yeah. And so we're living life, immersed in nature, exposed to these frequencies that change throughout the seasons. If you live somewhere more northern. And so, for example, I'm in Jersey right now, and it's December. And so UVB light is going to go away completely in about a week, and it will stay gone for about 6 weeks. And that's because it's the shortest wavelength. And as the Earth's axis tilts away from the sun, the atmosphere density becomes thicker, and those UVB rays they're not strong enough to penetrate through, so they get reflected back out. Versus in the summertime here, as we get angled towards the sun, it's a more direct path, and so more UVB can penetrate through, and that's why we get these latitude-dependent seasonal changes in sunlight intensity, but also day length as well. So in the morning, when the sun starts coming up at sunrise, we have a very strong red shift, and that's why the sunrise looks red, it looks orange. You see a lot of these longer wavelengths of light because those long wavelengths of light don't struggle to penetrate through the atmosphere. So they can go right through, and that's why most of them are coming through, and more of the blue are being scattered, the violet are being scattered, and so that's why we see this kind of beautiful red sunrise. And as the sun approaches midday, it becomes very white, and that's because more of that short wavelength light comes in, and it creates a more broad spectrum composition, and that gives us more of that white light, and white contains all colors. And so people often don't think about color as it relates to light, but I just want to remind everyone that nothing inherently has a color. So if you take a ruby, for example, a red ruby, if you're in a room that doesn't have any red light in it, that ruby is not going to be red. It's only red because it's reflecting out red wavelengths of light from your environment. And this is, the case with everything. So we have this full spectrum of sunlight that changes throughout the day. Mornings are red shifted, midday is higher in the short wavelengths of light, and then it goes back down for sunset. We see that red shift again. And those are kind of the rhythms and the photonic patterns that our bodies are expecting to receive throughout the day. So at sunrise, we have this very nice ratio of red and blue. The blue is lower, but it's at the right ratio that is required to help turn our body online, optimize our cortisol rhythms, help to repair some of these proteins in our cells called heme proteins, which are not only involved in proteins like hemoglobin, which is responsible for oxygen transport, but a lot of those protein complexes in mitochondria that we spoke about earlier also contain heme complexes. And so that ratio of red and blue is just right to help start repairing those so that the mitochondria are optimized for the day to come. Then between 30 minutes and an hour and a half after sunrise, depending on the time of year, we have what's called UVA rise. And UVA rise is when UVA light starts coming into the light spectrum. UVA light is very important, not only from a circadian perspective, but from a cardiovascular perspective and mitochondrial perspective as well. So UVA light tickles receptors on our eyes and skin and other parts of the body as well, called neuropsin. Neuropsin is a UVA light detector that's built into every nook and cranny of the surfaces of our body. And that's why I always go crazy when, you hear dermatologists and ophthalmologists saying that, you need to block UV light at all costs. It's only harmful. There's nothing good that can come from it. Well, if that's the case, why do our entire surfaces of our body are frosted with this protein that is looking for UVA light? Nature doesn't make mistakes. It's there for a reason. And those receptors, when they get stimulated, help to anchor in the circadian rhythm at the local tissue level. So when we talk about anchoring the circadian rhythm at like a broad scale, we're really talking about the light coming into the eyes that is helping to tell the master clock in the brain, which is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN, to understand what time of day it is. So blue light in particular is really helping to send that signal in order to anchor that clock in. And as we mentioned, blue light is a little bit less earlier in the day and it peaks midday. So depending on the ratio of blue relative to other things, or the intensity of that blue, that's going to help your brain in your hypothalamus, this SCN, to know what time it actually is, which of course is being totally just messed up from the fact that all of our LED lighting and our device screens are really enriched in blue light. And if we're using them when the sun isn't up, if we're using them at night, for example, after the sun goes down in an unfiltered manner, we are telling our bodies that it's actually midday when it's the evening. And so we get this circadian disruption that creates a whole host of issues that I'm going to circle back to. But for now, I just want to mention that the UVA light helps to entrain at the local tissue level, the circadian rhythm, because every tissue needs to be coordinated in its timing. You can imagine the master clock in the brain does help to send factors throughout the system that helps to inform the body about what time it is. And then that signal needs to be coherent with the signals that the other tissues are also receiving. So if you're, just standing outside in the morning, that signal is coherent. You're getting the same light signal through your eyes that you are through your skin, and those are meeting and they're helping to synergize with one another to anchor those circadian rhythms in. But UVA light also plays a really important role in the production of something called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a factor that can be produced in the skin in response to UVA light and then diffuse into the bloodstream. It's a very important vasodilator, so it helps to open up the blood vessels, deliver nutrients and oxygen to tissues, remove waste from tissues. Nitric oxide is a lot of like gym bros will know about it because they'll take a lot of nitric oxide boosters to help get a better pump in the gym. But you can naturally do that just by getting UVA light, and the amount you make is proportional to the amount of skin you have exposed, because that UVA light is stimulating that nitric oxide production in the skin. So there is actually validity to like tanning nude, for example, like highly recommend. Also, neuropsin, that UVA light detector, is expressed in the testes. And so all of the guys out there sunning their buttholes and their like fun stuff, like that's actually science-based. Like I could actually tell you that you might be doing something really good. I mean, the science would support it, right? And they will
the doctor is signing off on it.
I'm dead. And actually that neuropsin, that stimulation of neuropsin in the testes, is associated with increased testosterone levels, improved fertility. And so, yeah.
Tan your balls. It's okay. You get the permission here.
That's right.
I love it. I love it. I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
You mentioned how in New York, for example, because of the location and the seasons, you get different types of light at different times of the year. When I used to live in Australia, I used to feel like the sun in summer was scorching the skin, like was so hard on the skin. It was, and I wasn't one of those who, put tan lotion and all that stuff. Like I never used any of that stuff because I have a good color skin and I don't get burnt easily. But even though my body is kind of well prepared for sun, the Australian sun felt so different than the Mediterranean sun. It felt like a lot stronger. The radiation was stronger. Something was different in it. Why is that? Why do you feel different? Why do you feel the sun different in different places around the world?
Yeah, so part of that is going to be due to the UV index, which, depending on what part of Australia you're in, could be quite high in the summer. And if you look at the native indigenous people to that land, the Aboriginals, like their skin is very dark.
Very
So
dark.
that is what your skin should look like if you're adapted to that environment. So it makes sense that anybody who's lighter than that will not fare as well because they're not their skin didn't evolve and their biology didn't evolve in that environment to be able to fully harness it. And that's why we also see regions of the world that are very equatorial or that have high altitude as well, because as you go up in altitude, UV index also goes up. If you look somewhere like Nairobi, Kenya, the people who live there have a very, very pigmented skin, and that's because their UV index is off the chain. It's super high altitude and it's around the equator. So it's like a double whammy. And so that skin pigmentation evolved to be able to not just protect, because the mainstream model that fears UV light and says that it's bad will tell you the melanin's there to protect you from the sun. But I would actually make the argument that is now supported by new research coming out from Dr. Arturo Solis Herrera, who is doing this work around human photosynthesis, and that uses melanin versus chlorophyll. In plants, they use chlorophyll in order to make energy from sunlight and water. But in humans, he has created this theoretical framework and is doing actual studies now as well, showing that melanin can do very similar things in humans. And that melanin is not simply protecting you, but it's actually allowing you to harness the high energy light in that environment to do productive work to support energy metabolism, essentially, within the system. And so it's not, I think a lot of times if you look at mainstream dermatology, for example, they will say there's no such thing as a healthy tan. Well, it just couldn't be further from the truth. And also, what about the people who naturally have melanin? Are you saying that that's bad?
Yeah.
Like, what are the implications of that? It just sounds so wrong. And it is, especially when we're talking about the modern environment, because melanin is just so interesting. To backtrack slightly, we make new melanin in our skin and in deep in our bodies in response to UV light, in particular UVB light, but also UVC light, the light that our mitochondria are making. So like the deeper parts of the body, for example, the substantia nigra within the brain, which is defective in Parkinson's disease, it's full of melanin. And that melanin begins breaking down. It can be broken down to actually help make dopamine. But one of the powerful things that somebody with Parkinson's can do in order to help mitigate their condition and ultimately possibly even reverse it a bit, I mean, we have to do some research there, but it's certainly going to be safe, is basically optimizing UVB light exposure from the environment and then also getting cold, because when you get cold, it's very stimulating to the mitochondria to make their own energy, but light as well. And so you're increasing UV light production within and without, and it's like a double whammy to help rebuild that melanin in the substantia nigra that is dwindling. But anyway, to circle back, so UVB light is helping to stimulate melanin production in the skin. UVA light doesn't make new melanin, but it helps to pull the melanin that you have towards the surface. So if you look at like most tanning beds, for example, they're usually UVA dominant, depending on like what level you're using. That UVA light will pull melanin towards the surface, but it's not making new melanin. We need UVB light in order to make new melanin, and it's via this complex prohormone called POMC, or pro-opiomelanocortin. POMC is cleaved into 10 different hormonal products, 3 of which are alpha, beta, and gamma MSH, or melanocyte stimulating hormone. So as the name implies, the MSHs help to stimulate the melanocytes in the skin and other parts of the body to make new melanin. So that's what's allowing, the system to make more of this pigment that can then, give you a tan, but also help to improve redox balance and mitigate oxidative stress in every kind of nook and cranny of the body. A couple other things that are made from POMC that are important. One of them is beta endorphin. Beta endorphin is an endogenous opioid molecule that is even more potent rather than morphine at the level of the opioid receptors. And it's, very anxiolytic, reduces depression, improves mood, improves dopamine status. So it helps to kind of flood the brain with dopamine so that you can actually think more critically and feel good at a baseline. That's why a lot of people, you go out in the sun, you feel good. You just feel happier. You feel more content. You don't feel, and actually I have a whole theory about this as it relates to demonizing UV light and the rise of materialism, because the more you avoid getting your dopamine from natural sources like the sun, and you're, again, supposed to be outside all day virtually, and naturally our ancestors were like that. When you're not there, you're constantly going to be looking for hits of dopamine elsewhere, whether it's from the junk food, from the social media, from the pornography, from the drugs, from the alcohol, like pick your poison. You're going to be on this dopamine roller coaster versus kind of cruising at altitude if you get your dopamine from sunlight exposure. So the demonization of UV light is actually totally playing into the hand of the paradigm that wants to control you, to kind of support your urges and allow you to kind of waste your time and your life focusing on getting these small hits versus actually creating an abundant life, not only, externally, but from a bioenergetic standpoint as well. The other important factor that actually I kind of mentioned already, alpha MSH, as it relates to melanin, we talked about, but it also is a really important factor as it relates to weight and metabolism. So alpha MSH can tickle the hypothalamus, where it increases energy expenditure and it decreases appetite. And so when you're exposed to UVB light and you're making this POMC, you're going to feel better, you're going to think better, you're going to be less impulsive, and then you're also going to not have to eat as much, and you're going to have more energy. It's like, if this could be put in a pill, and actually it kind of has, because Ozempic hijacks this exact pathway. It works on the same pathway. So the GLP-1 agonists, they mimic GLP-1, but then that leads to a cascade that increases the production of POMC in the brain, which then creates these factors that makes you feel better and makes you less hungry and increases your energy and all these things. So we can get that naturally simply by getting our UVB light from the sun, which is peaking midday, depending on the season. Like I said, here at around 40 north latitude, we're going to lose it for about 6 weeks. Though I will still have it because I'm going to the Caribbean in a couple weeks, which is nice. But so there's an app called the My Circadian app that I would recommend that allows you to basically track sunrise, UVA rise, UVB rise, and then you can see kind of, if you're going to get any UVB at all during the wintertime, you'll be able to see that in the app as well. There's also a lux meter on the app, which is important because when we're talking about getting full spectrum sunlight, it's not just the spectrum that's important, but it's also the brightness of the light that's important. So when you go outside on a sunny day like it is here today and you use that lux meter, it'll tell you somewhere between like 60,000 and 200,000 lux, depending on where you're at and like what the clarity is like. In contrast, most people are living over 90% of the time that Americans spend, from their day to day is indoors. And most indoor environments don't make it over 1,000 lux. So we're talking, between a 60 and 100-fold difference in brightness. And brightness is very important to help stimulate serotonin production, to help elevate mood, cognition. And then later in the day, when the sun goes down and the light gets dim and the blue light goes away, that serotonin can be converted into melatonin, which then helps you to get sleepy and get good quality sleep. And so the brightness of the light that people receive during the day is absolutely critical as well. And that's why, like in my setup here, you can't see it, but I have like a Chroma Sky portal, which is a 10,000 lux light that is kind of my ring light, so to speak, here. I also have this lamp up here, which is wait, where is it? There it is.
Yes.
That is a reptile bulb, and it's 100 watts. I also have 150 watt ones. The higher the wattage, the brighter the light. The reptile bulbs have everything from UV out through infrared. So it's basically mimicking what you would get from sun indoors in the form of a nice bright incandescent bulb, which is also important because all of our modern LED lighting doesn't have any infrared, and all of our modern window glass blocks infrared. And I want to actually talk about infrared light next as it relates to mitochondrial function, as that related to your question. But do you have any questions before I go there?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I got it right. My Circadian app is the one you talked about, and the reptile bulbs and the lux. There was an app for
it's
lux.
the My Circadian app has the lux meter on it.
Okay, has it. Okay, yeah, keep going.
Okay, great. So there was an episode of Huberman Podcast that came out a couple days ago with Dr. Glenn Jeffrey, who is amazing, and he's a very close colleague of a colleague of mine and a friend of mine, Scott Zimmerman, who also lives here in Jersey. He was on my podcast, Indoctrinate Yourself. I didn't mention that, but I have a podcast as well. And so...
Undoctrinate yourself.
Yes.
Go ahead.
And so Glenn Jeffrey did this whole 2-ish hour conversation about the importance of light. And in particular, he talked quite a bit about long wavelength infrared light and red light. And it was actually a great conversation. I don't listen to Andrew's podcast very much because I just get irked at like half truths, but Glenn did a great job. And if anybody listens to that, I'm going to kind of give a TLDR here. So I mentioned that sunlight has, actually, I didn't mention the ratios. So less than 10% of midday sunlight is UV light, varies depending on the time of year. About 25% of midday sun is blue, and over 50% is red and infrared light. So if you're in nature, we're meant to be bathing in a lot of this red and infrared light all day long. And in particular, the near infrared wavelengths, as I mentioned earlier and kind of teased, are very penetrant. So they're able to penetrate deep into the body. So if you're standing outside, even if you're wearing clothes, near infrared light penetrates through clothes, through the skin, touches all the deep organs within your body. And it's where, when it gets in there, it's able to directly stimulate mitochondrial function. And so we're meant to be bathing in near infrared light all day long. And that's supposed to help mitochondria work better, more metabolic water to be produced, more biophotons, more energy. That is like the baseline for humanity up through 120 years ago, until the advent of, until the advent of really fluorescent bulbs, because even incandescent bulbs like this lizard light here are full of infrared light. So you're still getting a ton of that light if you're using firelight or incandescent bulbs indoors. But as soon as the fluorescent tube bulbs came around, this totally changed, this push towards energy efficiency. And this is like a whole tangent too, because this ties directly into this whole carbon narrative and climate change narrative that is just that. It's a narrative. It's not actually based in scientific fact, and it's actually simply just a mechanism of control. Because if we look at the outcomes of all of this energy efficient technology, it's making us sicker, more obedient, less able to think, and that's just all too convenient, of course. So when it comes to this near infrared light, we look at the spectrum of fluorescent tube bulbs. There's no red really at all, and there's a little bit of red, but no near infrared at all. Huge spike in blue, tiny spike in UVA in particular. Then we get to LEDs. Yeah. LEDs are worse in some ways because they're just more accessible. So people are having LEDs in their home in every room, and they flick them all on at night, and we're getting this huge spike in blue. Even if the LED is a warm LED, there's still a blue dominance. Yeah. And so that is very disruptive to the circadian system for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, that blue light is the primary stimulus coming in and informing your body about the time of day. Both LEDs and fluorescent tubes are also high in flicker, so you may not be able to see it with your eyes. Sometimes you can, but sometimes it just looks like it's a distorted light. But if you use your phone on slow motion mode, you can often actually perceive that flicker, and it's basically turning on and off very rapidly. And that stresses out the muscles of the eye. It also is stimulating to the sympathetic nervous system and activates your fight or flight nervous system. It can cause migraines. It can cause cognitive dysfunction. And so when we're talking about our screens and our light sources in the modern day, we're exposed to a ton of blue, a ton of flicker, and almost no UV or infrared. And that includes our window glass, which blocks UV and also blocks most near infrared because it's considered thermal. So this goes back to like that whole energy efficiency conversation. So anything that's thermal means that it's warming up. And the reason that firelight feels warm, the reason that the sun feels warm, is that it has a ton of this infrared light, also known as heat. We can't see it with our eyes. We can only see violet through red, but it is there, and you can look using an infrared camera, and that's, allows you to kind of visualize infrared light. So that infrared light is seen as energy inefficient because it would require you to, run your AC for longer or, whatever. It's basically just not allowing you to create a microclimate in your house. And so our window glass blocks this quote unquote thermal energy, but in doing so is completely depleting the indoor environment of infrared light, coupled to the fact that none of our light sources in the modern day have infrared unless you're using firelight or incandescent bulbs. And so we are deeply, deeply deficient in near infrared light. We're also deeply deficient in UV light. And of course, as it turns out, UV and IR light are the two arguably most important wavelengths of light for human bioenergetics to actually allow our mitochondria to function optimally. And so we've essentially selectively depleted the most two important frequencies from our modern environments. And then at the same time, we're telling people not to go outside, or we're telling people to slap the sunscreen when they go out, add the sunglasses, cover up at all costs. And it's the exact opposite. And if people think about, skin cancer, for example, I often get this question, what about skin cancer? Well,
Yeah.
let's talk about that, because if you look at the actual data for melanomas, which are the most lethal skin cancers, virtually no one dies of basal cell or squamous cell carcinomas. Maybe very, very, very small fraction of people will. And in fact, the data on SCCs, the squamous cell carcinomas, doesn't really suggest a correlation with sun exposure. There may be a very small signal for basal cell carcinomas, but it's associated with burning and frequency of burns, which is totally avoidable. You don't have to burn when you get sun, and we can talk about that as well. But if you look at melanomas, we have an inverse relationship, actually. We see that the people who get more sun are less likely to get a melanoma. We see that people with low vitamin D levels have a higher likelihood of getting melanoma, and that it's more severe and more lethal. We see that people who have higher vitamin D levels have lower rates of melanoma, and that those melanomas are more aggressive. And so what we actually see is for the skin cancer that actually matters the most, getting more sun, not less, is actually better. Moreover, if we look at the risk-benefit analysis of sun exposure overall, we see some very striking things. So first of all, we see that the more sun people get, the lower their all-cause mortality. So the lower the likelihood they die from any disease.
Yeah.
We also see lower rates of breast cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer, pancreatic. We see lower levels of diabetes, obesity, neurodegeneration, autoimmune disease. So if you look at the risk-benefit analysis of sun exposure, which we can do for, any intervention, you can see that modern medicine and the mainstream narrative is focused on this very small sliver of risk that is completely able to be mitigated as long as you're not burning. That risk does not apply to you. And they're ignoring this vast benefit that you get from sun exposure, which is basically protection against every disease state that we are suffering with in the West and in modernity. And so it's just very disingenuous. And that's why I'm, very passionate about talking about it and helping people to implement this in their life. And with regards to burning, before I turn the mic back to you, there are a few things that you can do to avoid burning. Number one, see sunrise. The red and infrared light from the sun helps to prime your skin to be able to make melanin more easily later in the day. It helps to sync up, of course, the circadian rhythm as well, because when that skin circadian clock is in alignment with the central clock in the brain, everything just works better. We have more coherence within our biology. And so that's one thing, seeing sunrise. Another thing would be optimizing DHA status, so getting enough omega-3s from animal sources. My favorite source is caviar, because the DHA in caviar is even more bioavailable than from fish, for example, or other sources. Lamb has some DHA as well, but caviar has a special form called phospholipid DHA and EPA, and so those phospholipid forms can actually get into the eyes and brain better. But DHA in general is anti-inflammatory, and if you're inflamed, you're going to be more likely to burn. And in particular, as it relates to the gut, there's a gut, skin, lung axis, such that if you have inflammation in your gut or your lungs, you're going to be more likely to be inflamed in your skin. All of these tissues are kind of coordinated together. And on that note, if you eat late at night, you're going to be more likely to burn the next day, because the gut clocks are desyncing up with the rest. And because the gut and the skin are in direct communication, you're eating at night, you're sending the signal that it's actually daytime when it's nighttime, and now your skin also gets that message, that memo that, okay, it's daytime. And so it gets out of sync.
Wow.
Non-native EMFs, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 5G, all this increases burn risk by creating mitochondrial dysfunction, especially on our surface tissues, our eyes, brain, proximal brain regions, and our skin. And so mitigating non-native EMF exposure the best we can. One great way to do that is actually to get a tan, because melanin absorbs all wavelengths of light from gamma radiation all the way out through radio waves. radio waves being our common non-native EMFs. And so one of your best protection and shielding mechanisms against these frequencies is to create a nice solar
You
callus.
serious?
Yes.
Well, I just got another beautiful hack from you right now. So it's time for me to get a tan so that I get less EMF radiation.
Yes.
Amazing.
And it's actually incredible. There was research done in the 90s at Chernobyl by some Russian research team. And they went and they were exploring kind of the fallout, and they found these mushrooms that were pitch black. And they were like, what the heck are these mushrooms doing here? So they kind of took their samples back to the lab, and they found that these mushrooms had adapted to this nuclear fallout by increasing melanin production. And turns out those mushrooms were using melanin to harness the gamma radiation from the nuclear fallout to make energy.
Wow.
And this actually spurred on Dr. Herrera's research to understand, okay, how is melanin involved in energy production, and how can it use high energy photons, like from UV light, for example, to actually make free energy in humans? And so I think, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that those studies were what motivated him to kind of pursue this line of thinking and this line of research. And mushrooms and fungi in general are actually more closely related to animals than they are to plants. And so it stands to reason that our melanin in our bodies can also be used in a similar way to harness high energy photons from the environment to make energy. But not only that, but because melanin is a black pigment, remember, anything that's black absorbs all wavelengths of light. And so we absorb the gamma radiation, the UV, the visible. There's a little gap in absorption in the near infrared, which is just kind of a beautiful design feature, because if your melanin on your skin could absorb near infrared, it wouldn't be able to get deep into your body and stimulate mitochondrial function in your deeper tissues. So there's a little gap in the near infrared. And then after that, you can absorb, again, radio waves by the melanin on your surface. And so, yes, it's a great way to protect yourself against radiation in the form of non-native EMFs. Also in the form of like radon, like if people live somewhere that has high radon in their basements, for example, that would also be a protective mechanism. Though there's like a little bit of an aside there that I'll just mention briefly, because apparently there's actually radiation hormesis, meaning that if you look at the epidemiologic data around radon exposure in particular, which is just naturally emitted from some rocks in the ground in certain parts of the world, there's actually a sweet spot for radon exposure that's not zero. So the people who live with very low levels of radon, they live less long. Like they live shorter lifespans. The people who live at very high radon exposures also live shorter lifespans, but the people that have this intermediate amount actually live longer. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought it was only negative. I mean,
know.
that's what you hear, that radon is just dangerous outright, and that's it. But
yeah, but it's
you're
probably
saying that there's
like
a spectrum there too.
It's like anything with like when it comes to stressors, there's usually a sweet spot where it's like if it's just enough to help create an adaptive response in the body, but it's not too much to start breaking the system down. It actually helps to build you back stronger in the same way that exercise works, cold works, sauna works, like all of these things work to help create more resilience by creating these little stressors over time.
Stimulate, yeah, of course. Amazing. Thank you for that knowledge. Okay, I have a few questions that came from people when I told them you're going to be on the show related to what you just discussed. So the first one was, does light affect mitochondria in different cells at different times of the day the same?
Good question. So this kind of relates to what we were talking about with regards to how the light spectrum changes throughout the day. So the red and infrared component is always very strong from morning through sunset. But as the sun gets higher off the horizon, we get more of that UV and more of the blue. And so depending on the intensity of that UV light, for example, you're getting different levels of penetration. And so I would say that there's actually a kind of a combinatorial effect. So I like to think about the sun spectrum as like Morse code, except instead of just having zeros and ones, we have everything from UVB out through infrared. And so depending on the time of day, we're getting these different notes that are sent to the body and then are creating a little symphony that is being interpreted by our bodies, and we're getting a response accordingly. And that's changing as the sun goes up and as it comes back down. We're getting a different combination of photons that are giving different information, basically. And that's all encoded in the light that we're receiving, which is also why we're never going to be able to replace the sun. Like we can't make a sun inside. It's not going to work. And I was actually just talking to somebody about this yesterday, how it seems like on these big platforms like Andrew's podcast, for example, that it almost feels like we're being teed up for some sort of a hack to like, you don't need to go outside, just use this thing instead.
Of course.
And
it's part of the transhumanist agenda.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, there's this narrative or belief underlying the transhumanist movement that it says that basically we can outsmart God, we can outsmart nature, we can do it better.
Exactly.
And it is so hubristic and just
maybe that's
maniacal.
Like Huberman.
Yeah, right. That's funny.
No, come on. Like, I get it from so many people in so many directions, even Bitcoiners that should know better, you know, they don't see the psyop in that. And the whole robotics thing, I mean, I'm all for tech. I come from tech. I love tech. I love every innovation that's going to make our lives better, but without compromising our godly spark and our connection to source God and the earth. And we have to be smart about how we are allowing these innovations to enter into our lives.
100%. And it goes back to exactly what you're saying. It actually has to make our lives better, right? Then it's like, okay, we can embrace it, but we actually have to look at the totality of how it's impacting us in order to understand that. For example, there is just this total resistance to acknowledging the harms of non-native EMFs in the form of these radio frequencies, radar, the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, etc. Even
and
though
all the wearables and what they're
and the closer you are to a source, the higher the intensity that you're receiving is. So any wearable is a complete no-go, in my opinion.
Yeah, same.
Because it's
same
literally strapped right to you. I used to wear an Apple Watch and my wrist shrunk a lot. And it changed like the texture of my skin, like the pattern was different.
Oh my God.
I got like weirded out, and then I stopped wearing it, and then I learned about Jack
analog watch, people. Analog with a
quartz watches.
Yes. Normal.
Exactly.
Cheap. Good.
Yes. So just that we're so resistant to acknowledging the harms of non-native EMFs, even though we have data literally that go back 70 years to Robert O. Becker's work, showing unequivocally the biological harms of these frequencies. If anybody wants to get smart on this, read Cross Currents and read The Body Electric by Robert O. Becker. We actually read both of those in my book club. We're still finishing up Cross Currents. He outlines extensively the harms that he characterized way back in the 50s and 60s on this issue. And, it's actually kind of sad what ended up happening with his career, because he was at the forefront here, understanding that there were non-thermal biologic effects of non-native EMF. So in the mainstream, like the FCC and other governing bodies that kind of control this, they'll say the only harms that come from non-native EMFs are thermal, meaning if they heat up the tissue, that's the only thing that causes an issue. Becker's work showed unequivocally that the effects are non-thermal, that it's actually creating mitochondrial dysfunction that is creating aberrations at the cell, like at a very deep level, and can create long-term issues. So back in his time, there was a military project going on to put up an antenna called the Sanguine antenna that was basically going to be using radar to communicate with submarines underwater to be able to basically have, I guess, like clandestine communication methods. And he showed that these frequencies could cause cardiovascular disease, cancer, and that like way more research was needed before anything like that was used. And he basically was publishing all of these papers into the military archives, showing that there were these harms, and not hearing back from people as he's submitting these, because he was trying to kind of raise a flag so that people would go and look at this and kind of take a beat before putting up this antenna. Never heard back. Looked in the archives, found that his papers weren't being submitted. Then he ended up going on the nighttime talk show 60 Minutes to blow the whistle on this issue. And he had this, maybe 10-minute long expose on the harms and the research that he did in his lab and why this project should be paused. And within a few days, all of the funding that he had got stripped, and he completely lost his livelihood and his career, and his research was essentially buried, even though he was like, cream of the crop physician scientist doing incredible work, very strong, rigorous science. It went against the grain of what the institutions and what the paradigm wanted to do. And so as soon as you get to that point, like they're gonna do away with you. They only keep people around as long as they're convenient, right? And then, but we still have access to that information through his books. And then, there's been a ton of research since then as well, showing these acute and chronic harms from non-native EMF exposure that are just, as we go back to like the transhumanist thing and like understanding the risk benefit of tech, this is like the perfect example. Like, we know that there's unequivocal harms. Obviously, we're getting benefits. We can do this podcast. We can communicate with people around the world. But if we were just to be honest about the issues, we could just get really curious and creative and create solutions that don't have the same trade-offs. But instead, we're just made to be blind and pretend there's no problems just out of convenience, essentially. It's like, again, like a money thing, I guess. But, I think also these radio frequencies can be used for other nefarious reasons as well. I think we're only just scratching the surface on like what their potential for weaponization is. And I mean, the very basic example would be like Havana syndrome, which was way back in the day, using radio frequencies as like targeted EMF weapons to basically, addle people's minds and create cancers and things like that. But it's just a real shame. And I think I truly believe in human ingenuity and our ability to create very innovative solutions to problems. But in order to do that, we have to agree that there's a problem. And right now, that is kind of the blockade that we're facing as it relates to non-native EMFs. So that's why everybody just needs to do their best to protect themselves and their families against these frequencies. And, whenever you can use Ethernet, use Ethernet. Don't use your laptop on your lap. Don't leave your phone in your pocket. Put your phone on airplane mode at night. Don't sleep with it next to your head. If you live somewhere that has like a cell tower nearby, for example, I have a couple reels on my Instagram from a
recent ones that you showed with the trees and the
yes. Yes. So green plants are incredible allies against non-native EMFs. They absorb a ton of that. And so you can leverage that. But my one client that's in person, we did like an assessment of her home, and there's a cell tower like a half a mile away from the front side of her home. And that entire front wall, we used the EMF meter, was lit up like a Christmas tree. And so what she did was she got EMF blocking window panels, and she's also doing EMF blocking paint on that wall that's facing that direction to mitigate the frequencies that are coming in. And right now, she just put the panels up a few weeks ago, and I went back and tested, and they worked incredibly well. So I'm gonna do more content on that soon as well. But in the interim, something simple that people can do that she actually did while she was waiting for the panels is leveraging aluminum foil, which looks kind of crazy.
Some people don't know where the whole thing about tinfoil hat comes from. And it comes from there. Like, if you actually put tinfoil around your head or any type of metal, right, around your head, you can block the EMF radiation.
Yes. So with the Havana syndrome, because there were targeted weapons at the brains of individuals to basically make them go crazy or make them hear voices and things like this, the tinfoil hat would actually block those rays, that radiation from coming in. And so tinfoil is a very cheap and easy solution that you can, or tool that you can use to help mitigate EMF exposure. So I think what she ended up doing for like the few weeks before the panels came in is like she literally covered her windows with tinfoil on that wall. And it worked. Like, we tested it and it worked just fine. You can also do that with routers, with other things. You can even do like a little test at home, like wrap your phone in tinfoil and have somebody try to call you. They won't be able to because those frequencies can't get in. And then you open up the tinfoil and then it can get in. So you can prove that to yourself. The other thing I'll mention for EMF mitigation is just do your best to mitigate non-native EMFs by getting enough natural EMFs. So getting enough sun, getting enough grounding. Right now I'm sitting in my office, but I have my foot on a grounding mat that's plugged into the earth out the window. I basically just run the wire out the window, plug it into the earth. So I'm able to ground while we're having this conversation. I got my incandescent bulb, so I'm doing what I can to not freeze my ass off having this conversation outside, but still keep some of those beneficial signals present in the indoor environment. So just doing little things to help add back in the things that we're missing indoors can really pay off dividends, especially as it relates to some of these ubiquitous factors like these non-native EMFs. Like, just doing your best to get those natural EMFs that we get from grounding, from getting in the sunshine and being outside can really be quite helpful if we're looking to mitigate some of the harms of these ubiquitous modern frequencies.
Tired of feeling like your freedom and future are fading away? Do you live in a country with growing inflation, crazy housing prices, weird culture, and a chaotic economy? You're not alone, and my friend Mikkel Thorpe and his team at Expat Money can help. Mikkel is the world's leading expat consultant on a mission to free you from broken systems. He's been an expat for 25 years, lived in 9 different countries, and has helped hundreds of people with second residencies and passports, offshore banking, international investing, and many other essential tools. If you're serious about protecting your wealth and your family, it's not enough to hope things will get better. You need a plan B in another country. The team at Expat Money can help you build it legally, safely, and without wasting years of research. Visit expatmoney.com/eflat and leave your details for a follow-up. In a world hypnotized and sleepwalking towards totalitarian control and digital enforcement, awakened voices rise to inspire change and radiate hope. In December 2024, I had the honor of hosting Professor Mattias Desmet at a conference I produced called New Totalitarian Order. This masterclass is now recorded and available to watch. The conference explores the psychology behind global mass processes, offering a behind-the-scenes look at science, economics, and human potential. It addresses challenging global agendas, mass formation, transhumanism, consciousness, societal change, and the path to transformation. Click the link in the show notes to access 3.5 hours of exclusive presentations, in-depth content, and my fireside chat with Professor Desmet. Use my code EFLAT for 10% off. I hope you find great value in it. In some of your content, Doc, I heard you talk about grounding in the context of inflammation and reducing inflammation. And I remember that last year I was in El Salvador and I got this rash all over my stomach and back. So like the lungs area and the kidneys and the back. And it was so itchy and I was so frustrated. And the only thing that helped me reduce the itchiness and the inflammation was to go in the morning, early morning. I tried sunrise. I did okay. And just ground myself on the sand in the beach and rub my body in sand. Because, in El Salvador, the sand is full of quartz, I think. It's black from the volcano. Yep. And then dip myself in the water. And that was the only thing that calmed my body down. So, and then when I heard you say it, I'm like, okay, that's why it worked. I did it just because I was so desperate and I had to try everything. Mm-hmm. So I was so itchy. So I just put the sand everywhere and I was grounding. And that helped. Like I was lying on the sand.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, the research on grounding shows that even just 25 minutes of grounding can dramatically reduce inflammatory burden. And they can do that with basically thermographs. So if you look at somebody on a thermograph or a thermogram rather, the areas that are hot are inflamed and the areas that are cool aren't. And so you can basically do a before and after 25 minutes of grounding, those areas that were hot cooled down dramatically. And we're really meant to be grounding all day long. Our ancestors up through the advent of modern petrochemical based materials were always grounded because all materials were grounded. We didn't have all these polyurethanes coating floors. We didn't have all these rubber soled shoes that were disconnecting us from that current of the earth. And so doing our best to kind of ground as much as possible is definitely a huge win. Ideally directly to the earth and not through an outlet, just because the ground on an outlet can have dirty electricity or jump conduction, which you don't want. Yeah. If you test your outlets, maybe it's okay, but sometimes there can just be differences. Like if you have your dishwasher on or your dryer on, now maybe suddenly there's jump conduction where when you tested it, when those things weren't on, it was fine. So I just say, hedge your bets and directly ground into the earth. I have a highlight reel on my Instagram. I think it's called Grounding Test that basically shows you how to run a little extension wire out into the yard to directly ground out a window, for example, or a door versus into an outlet. But what grounding does is it essentially acts as a huge sink for positive charge. So as I mentioned earlier, we have positive and negative charge in mitochondria that is separated in order to act as that battery to power all the good things that mitochondria are doing. But we can essentially get buildup of static charge, positive charge, because we're not grounding. And that's supposed to be a constant sink. Just like when you rub a balloon against your hair and then your hair goes out, it's that buildup of positive charge that is making it repel from the other strands of hair. And so we need to ground in order to discharge all of that excess static charge that interferes with how well our mitochondria are able to work. So the more that you can ground, the better from an inflammatory standpoint, from a mitochondrial standpoint. Any leather-soled shoes will be naturally grounding. You can also buy grounding footwear from different websites. One's called like Harmony 783, but there's a few out there. I have a pair of flip-flops from them. Of course, you can go barefoot. Wool socks, cotton socks will also allow for the grounding force to be transmitted. Any natural fiber and material will work. It's just the synthetic stuff that's not going to allow that charge to flow.
Amazing. Okay, moving to the tropics. Is that recommended?
Good question. So I would say it really depends on somebody's health and also somewhat as well their mitochondrial haplotype. So we didn't talk about this, but depending on where your maternal ancestors came from is going to dictate where your mitochondria come from, because you inherit all your mitochondria from your maternal line. So your mom, your mom's mom, your mom's mom's mom, etc. And there are different haplotypes in different parts of the world. So if we look in Africa, for example.
Africa for me.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Libya. Yeah.
That's amazing. So you have very coupled mitochondria, meaning your mitochondria are very efficient at making energy, water, light, but they require more UV input from the environment in order to function optimally.
Mm-hmm.
In contrast, uncoupled mitochondria, which are from Scandinavia, so my maternal line they're basically Vikings. And so I have very, very uncoupled mitochondria from like Scandinavia, meaning that my mitochondria can do well with UV light, but they can also do pretty well with cold in the winter. So I can make my own light internally and my own heat internally in response to cold. People who have coupled mitochondria often don't tolerate cold as well. And you were actually describing that to me earlier, where you're saying you like gravitating towards the places where it's warm and sunny.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's actually, very in keeping with the haplotype story. And so for individuals who have coupled mitochondria that are living at very northern regions, like let's say somebody from Kenya living in Sweden, this would be a huge mismatch that would potentially warrant, if it was available to them financially, etc., to move back towards their more ancestral lands, that it would actually be quite beneficial for them from a health standpoint. The people with uncoupled mitochondria, they're kind of like chameleons. So we can kind of go anywhere and do well. We can kind of shapeshift to environments pretty well. And that's because the coupled mitochondria are actually the original mitochondria on the earth. So mitochondrial Eve, which is like the first, it's kind of the first woman who donated mitochondria to humanity. This was discovered by Dr. Doug Wallace out of Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He's like the godfather of mitochondrial medicine and just an absolute tour de force. And I really want to meet him. He's in his 80s now. I'm only 40 minutes away. I've been trying to track him down, but he doesn't answer emails. And I'm going to figure it out, though. I want him on the podcast. But he's still doing research, and he discovered this mitochondrial Eve years and years ago that emerged out of Africa and kind of drifted upwards into Europe. And then there was a divergence. One went towards Eurasia and the other one went north. And so the initial mitochondria are these coupled mitochondria out of Africa. And the more recent evolutions of mitochondria are the ones that are migrating north. And so the more recent evolutions of these mitochondrial haplotypes, basically, they kind of retain some memory of their origins. So you can kind of shift back and forth to a certain extent and adapt to that environment. Versus the coupled mitochondria, you really do best where it's warm and sunny year round and you're getting enough UV light from your environment. And so if that is the case for, any of your listeners, you would do well visiting the tropics, potentially moving more south when and if it's possible for you. But what I will say is for people who can't move, you can certainly still adapt to your local environment. It may just take a little bit more time to get cold adapted and to kind of immerse yourself and feel good in that environment, but it's still possible.
Yeah.
It's just going to feel maybe a little bit more of a challenge. It may take some more time to happen. But eating a local seasonal diet really helps to link your body to your natural local environment. Getting out in the sun, of course, experiencing the elements, the heat, the cold, even if it's just for a few minutes, can be very beneficial. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say on that But I
Yeah.
don't remember what the question was exactly.
No, that was perfect. I want to ask you also about geoengineering and
Oh,
Overcast. So there are
mhm.
many places around the world, I mean, almost everywhere, I think, that they're spraying us with whatever it is, coal fly ash that hides inside heavy metals or whatever, and they're trying to hide the sun in order to reflect back the sun rays to the back to space so that we are cooling Earth and climate change will not be a problem anymore. Obviously, it's never going to work, but they are working globally in hiding the sun from us. And so the question is, can we still get the same benefits of light treatment even under overcast or geoengineered skies?
Yeah, so when it comes to overcast days, you're still getting benefits from being outside. It's still far brighter than any indoor environment will be, so you're getting that benefit. The rays are still there, they're just attenuated a little bit and scattered, so they're not as concentrated in the way that, like, if you're out on a sunny day, it feels very concentrated. You can feel the warmth coming directly from the sun. On a cloudy day, it's just more scattered, so the photons are a little bit more erratic and not as concentrated in a single flow. So you're still getting benefits. So I definitely recommend, even if it's like a cloudy morning or a rainy morning, still try to get that natural light in your eyes first thing in the morning and, midday, etc., even if it's just for a few minutes. When it comes to geoengineering, it's definitely a little bit of an issue. I would still say that the benefits of being outside in the sun on a geoengineered day would still outweigh being indoors, because, I mean, we could talk about air quality, but like the
Mhm.
air quality outside is likely still going to be better than indoors, depending, like, if you have air filters running and things like this, and maybe it'll be a little bit cleaner inside. But there are still immense benefits to being outside when it's like that. Of course, listen to your body, and if you feel like you're getting like an allergic response or any
Yeah.
sort of inflammatory response, then, like, honor that and go
Yeah.
inside. But then, of course, do your best to create an indoor environment that's a bit more harmonious, using incandescent lights, maybe having some grounding mats, getting enough bright light in general indoors. So these would all be important things to do if you're kind of feeling reactive to the outdoor environment. And yeah, it's just like, the geoengineering stuff is crazy because almost everything else we have control over, that we can, like, autonomously choose to make better decisions for ourselves. But when it comes to our skies, we're completely at the mercy of
Yeah.
whoever is doing this. And
Uh-huh.
it's very frustrating, very dystopian. And the fact that, like, a lot of people will just, say contrails, whatever, blah blah blah. But, like, you look outside at some places, people will send me pictures, and it's literally like a
Yeah.
grid across the
Oh, yeah.
sky, and it's like, this is clearly orchestrated. This is not random.
Seriously, I mean, I start laughing today when people still do the contrail things. Like,
I know.
really, how blind can you be? Whatever. There are great podcasts and materials out there about it. There's a new book called The New Manhattan Project about the engineering. Yeah. Uh,
Wow.
Daniel Prince has a podcast called Once Bitten, and he did a wonderful episode with the author of the book, which I highly recommend listening
Wow.
to.
Oh, I saw you posted that. I want to check that
Yes,
out.
you should. You should listen to it. It's incredible. Okay, let's talk about cancer. The First of all, I want to know: have the COVID-19 mRNA products led to more cancer? I mean, Kevin and I did a whole episode about his revelation. Kevin McKernan, you should check
Mm.
out that episode. It was incredible. What are you seeing about the COVID-19 products, the mRNA products, the jabs, and all that?
Yeah, it's just absolutely heartbreaking. Everything that's kind of coming from the fallout of that. I mean, not only cancers, but I have multiple people, including a friend of mine who took a dose of the Moderna vaccine in her case, and immediately within a day broke out in hives all over her body, and 2 years later she's still dealing with that, and the only solution she was given by a doctor was to literally take antihistamines every single day.
Jesus.
And so many people are dealing with histamine issues
Yes.
post jab. And it's no surprise either, because the spike protein opens up the barriers of the body, the gut barrier, the blood brain barrier. And when your barriers become leaky, you're basically getting your inside of your body is being exposed to more of the outside world than it should. And histamine is like the first line of defense to that.
Yeah.
And so it is an intelligent response, but it also doesn't feel good. It can be quite scary. And it's exacerbated by the 5G rollout, which happened during the COVID lockdowns, is when it began. I think maybe it started a little bit earlier than that as well in some
Yeah,
places,
they
but it
put it
really
on
ramped up.
steroids during the lockdowns. They
Yes,
installed it
exactly.
everywhere.
And 5G, these non-native EMFs, these 5G waves, especially if you're in a city, they're using millimeter waves, so they're much stronger. And these frequencies have been known to open up the barrier tissues of the body, literally since the 1960s and Dr. Alan Fry's work.
As someone that flies a lot, I travel a lot. I know you have a whole course, and I'm going to take it. I'm going to do the course. I'm going to also put the link here in the show notes to take this course with me. What's the burden of travel on the body, and how can I best prepare myself for my traveling?
Yeah, so kind of a few of the pillar issues of travel are going to be non-native EMF exposure, which comes from going up at a high altitude. There's just more cosmic radiation reaching you within the plane. There's also the issue that they have Wi-Fi in the planes
Yes,
now. The closer you sit to the cockpit, the higher the EMFs from their radar system. So first class isn't
sit
actually
back.
ideal.
Yeah,
Yeah, sit back. We also have, of course, like circadian issues that can arise depending on how many time zones you're flying. You're obviously not grounded for that period of time at all. You're going to be sedentary for long periods of time. So those would be kind of some of the main ones. So really supporting your lymphatic system and your circulatory system before and after flying, getting a good tan to mitigate your non-native EMF exposure issues while you're flying. Of course, grounding and sun exposure before and after to help anchor, definitely before to help protect against the non-native EMFs, but after as well to help anchor you to the local environment. You can leverage blue blocking glasses to help adapt to whatever new time zone you're flying into.
yeah,
So basically, I actually have a whole protocol about how to use blue blockers strategically, and like using red lights versus like bright lights for the few days leading up to your trip in order to gradually shift to the time zone you're going to. If it's a short trip, you don't really need to do that. But if you're going to be there for an extended period of time, it makes sense to adapt a few days early so that it's pretty
okay,
seamless, especially if you have to hit the ground running when you arrive there.
yeah.
With regards to lymphatic support, I'm a big fan. So lymphatic massages, vibration, rebounding, lymphatic supporting herbs, circulatory stimulants like echinacea is a good one. Any sort of
Ah,
warming spices in general are good at stimulating the circulatory and lymphatic systems. What else? Exercise, of course. I
excellent.
actually, so that ebook, it's not even a full course. It's
Yeah,
just an ebook. It's $27 and it outlines literally all like the lymphatic support
yep,
techniques, all of
yep.
the circadian techniques. I'm like kind of brain farting right now on like all of them, but there's a lot to choose from. And I basically just tell people to like select 3 or 4 from each list to help incorporate into your schedule for the days leading up to travel and after as well to help
I'm gonna do that.
re-regulate. But yeah,
I'm
it's
totally
it's a
doing
great
that.
resource, and people can get 10% right now as well for the holidays. And the code is Holy Days, just HOLYDAYS.
Can I put it
Um,
in the, well, I'll put it in the
yeah,
show notes so people can use it.
yeah, you could put it in the show notes, and that's good for anything. Any of my courses or ebooks, people can get 10% off.
Excellent. All right. PTSD and anxiety, depression. This is something that a lot of people are now facing, especially hope. Unfortunately, where I come from, Israel is full of PTSD at the moment.
Mm.
Many people are carrying a lot of traumas and they're becoming depressed. I think it's 1 out of 2 people now taking antidepressants. Like Cipralex is off the charts.
Ugh.
Just doctors just writing it as if it was paracetamol. It's insane how many people are taking it, and people you would not think, like you're speaking to someone and they go, "Oh yeah, I take Cipralex." For them, it's like nothing. Like, what? You take antidepressants on a regular basis? So, what would be some handy tips you would give to people that are facing PTSD, depression, anxiety, in terms of some holistic, healthy things they can do, not pharma based?
Yeah. So, I mean, the crazy thing about the antidepressants too is they're very easy to get a prescription for, and they're almost impossible to get off of them,
Get
especially if
off,
you're on
right?
them for
They're addicting.
extended period of time. Not even not addicting, but the withdrawal
Is horrible.
is crazy. Like I have an uncle, for example, who he went to the doctor telling her that he just felt a little bit off, and she gave him this prescription and he didn't know what it was. He didn't know it was an antidepressant, and he had been on it for like 20 years. And I
Mm,
told him, like, you're on an antidepressant, like, And then he was like, I want to get off of it. And so he started weaning off of it. And within a few nights, he started getting these terrible night terrors and got so scared that he immediately went back on them and like doesn't want to even try to get off them at this point.
Shit.
And some other things that people can experience are like brain zaps. They can experience a lot of anxiety, rebound depression, things like this. And it's also pretty crazy because like the medical system will gaslight these people and say, oh, that's why you need to be on these drugs. This is how you would feel without them. And it's like, no, these are withdrawal symptoms from a drug that has completely hijacked the wiring of your brain and changed your brain chemistry.
Shit.
Yeah. And so, and obviously as well, there was a paper that was published, a very thorough paper published a couple of years ago showing that the whole serotonin model of depression was completely false. Like there's actually no correlation between levels of serotonin and depression. And so we basically went down this dead end path that said, you know, if you modulate serotonin, that's going to solve your issue, but it's not rooted in actual science. And like I mentioned earlier, when you get that bright full spectrum light during the day, you naturally will make serotonin, which, you know, independent of the SSRIs, like just helps you feel more connected, more energized, more able to go about your day in a way that feels fulfilling. Combine that, of course, with like the endorphins you make from UVB light. Now you're getting that dopamine response as well, which helps you feel more content, better, you know, able to critically think as well, and just go about your day in a more enjoyable way. So the light is really the main crux. The light and dark cycles are the main things that we need to focus on if there's any sort of mental health issues going on. So getting out in morning sun, getting out in midday sun, blocking blue light at night, using red light bulbs at night, keeping a very dim night light environment so that you can naturally get that melatonin response to optimize your sleep, and all the benefits that come from that, from neurotransmitter production and neurotransmitter balance in the brain as well. Really, the sleep is just absolutely critical. So having a very, very dark, cool sleeping environment. There was research that came out a few years ago, I think in 2021, that showed even very low levels of light in the sleeping environment. The next morning, you wake up with increased blood sugar, increased insulin, and more insulin resistance. Now imagine like even just a nightlight in your room is a problem. And imagine you have that every night. You're literally creating insulin resistance just on a daily basis. And ultimately that can create diabetes over time at some level. And then you combine that with eating a lot of high carbohydrate foods, hyper palatable foods, and you get on this, you know, sugar roller coaster that is also going to physiologically stress you out. And when we have anxiety, it's typically, you know, it can be a reflection of our total physiologic stress burden, that it's tipping us over a point. And the way that I really like to think about PTSD and trauma in general, it's basically an energetic input into the body that overwhelms the body's capacity to handle that input.
Yeah.
And when we talk about being able to move energy through the system, we need to have flux, we need to have flow, right? And in order to do that, we need to be connected to the earth, connected to the sun, so that we're actually laying the pipes down and having the infrastructure available to be able to move whatever it is. It could be lymph, it could be blood, it could just be energy or chi, depending on like how you want to think about it. Like all of these are kind of working on the same systems to a certain extent. You know, some are working via the neuronal pathways, and Becker actually did a lot of really cool work on acupuncture, showing that the meridian system is actually detectable. It's a bioelectric system, and the meridians are essentially working as like power lines, and the acupuncture points are like these hubs along the way that are like repeaters that amplify the signal back up. And this whole system is detectable using, you know, basically a simple voltmeter that he kind of rigged to be able to test on humans. And so, you know, it's very real. His work also showed, really importantly, that relates to this, is that pain is really the portal to healing. And we are very averse to pain as modern humans. We're very pain avoidant. But he showed very beautifully that pain is the stimulus that creates the regeneration response in the body. So, for example, you stub your toe, that pain signal gets sent to the brain, and the brain sends a signal back to the toe to begin the healing process. If you block that pain, you block the healing process. The same thing is happening in the medicalization of birth. You get an epidural. You're blocking the signals going from the uterine contractions to the brain, which then blocks the production of oxytocin, which is required for cervical dilation, which allows the baby to be born. So by giving the epidural, we're blocking the feedback loop that allows the birthing process to happen in a smooth fashion. And then, of course, we have all of these C-sections as a result of this, like these emergency C-sections and all of this. That is a huge issue because, for example, with C-sections, that's setting up a baby to have more issues throughout its lifetime because of the lack of microbiome seeding that comes from vaginal birth that you're supposed to get as you're born. You're not inoculated with those bacteria if you are born via C-section. And so it's already starting things off on the wrong foot. And then you bring formula in on that, full of seed oils and glucose and a bunch of garbage and deuterium. And it's just, a perfect storm to create a future of sick humans. And so, anyway, I just really like
And
to
you give them
highlight.
vaccines as they're
Oh
born.
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. They're shooting them up with everything, and it's.
I would have done so many things differently now if I would have had my son again. Like
Yeah,
knowing everything I know now, is like I took the epidural. I
yeah,
did do like a normal birth, but the epidural was so bad. And man, if I would have been wiser, I would have studied more and do my whole birth in a different way. My son, thank God, he's healthy and everything's
good.
fine. And he also didn't take the COVID vaccine and all
Thank
that.
God.
But it's like, I know that a lot of the issues he's had when he was growing up, being 3, 4, 5 years old with his breath and lungs, was related to the kind of stuff like you're just talking about, the formula
Yeah,
and the childhood vaccines and things that I've done that I would never do today, that
I
I could have
know.
prevented him from. But we learn.
Yeah, we all do the best we can with the
Yeah.
information we have. And I mean, the biggest take home from that as it relates to birth, anxiety, PTSD is that we need to lean into pain and discomfort. As Jack says, embrace the
Yeah.
suck. I know it can be very challenging, but the more you also engage in a circadian and a quantum biological lifestyle, the more you have tolerance for discomfort as well. You're actually
Yeah.
able to step up to the plate more effectively. And when you're able to do that, that's where growth comes. And so we need to not be so afraid of experiencing that, because that's our edge. That's where we can actually push beyond and, become more of what we are and what we're meant to be. So I think it's not just a psychological thing, it's a physiologic thing that when we get our biology regulated, we're able to face discomfort and challenge more effectively and be able to kind of rise to the occasion as well. So it just really starts with the very basics, getting out in the morning, getting your bare feet on the earth, trying to do your best to get out for light breaks throughout the day, blocking blue light at night, trying to eat a seasonal diet, shopping farmers markets, for example. And you don't have to be perfect. As Jack says, the Pareto principle, try to do 80% of the time, do things right, and you have 20% wiggle room. Even if you just do that,
Yeah.
you're going to completely change your life as a result of that. So just start. When I started, I literally just started by first thing when I woke up, going outside and getting sunlight and on my eyes and grounding for 5-10 minutes, and then wearing my blue blockers after dark and using red light bulbs instead of regular light bulbs. And within a day, I started noticing very palpable differences in my mood, my energy levels, my sleep quality, sleeping through the night and not tossing and turning at all, feeling more well rested. And as you begin to notice those differences, you build momentum that makes you want to keep doing it and want to keep building on that.
Absolutely.
And that's like kind of the wave you want to ride in order to, change your life in a positive direction. And it will happen very quickly. And that's another reason, like, I really like this work, is because
Yeah, you
people
see
can
results
notice the
straight
changes.
away. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. There's huge buy-in there because it's like, okay, I can feel these differences. Now I want to see, how far can I take this? How good can I feel? How good can it be?
Yes. I've been waking up every morning here in Florida for the sunrise, going to the beach.
Yay.
It's been incredible. I've been sleeping so much better. I eat less
Mm-hmm.
and I have more energy. So
Yes.
it's really helping me with many things. So yeah, I'm not perfect, as you said, but I am taking it step by step, and
That's it.
it's wonderful. You guys are amazing that you're spreading this information, and no, not many people talk about these things. Not
I
enough.
know. Yeah, I agree.
Can you explain your vision for a decentralized health system. How do you see a system like that working? How you mentioned when we did the panel, like, let's have a network of scientists, a network of doctors, of medical professionals, that the more we decentralize them, the more we let them be, as you said in the beginning, naturally curious and exploring science and health, then we can regain maybe some of that lost knowledge, not lost wisdom and insight that we once have. So what's your vision for a decentralized, healthy way of living?
Yeah, well, the thing about that is that it requires each individual to do the work. And one of the really cool things that I noticed when I started engaging in a more circadian lifestyle is that I felt like my intuition came back online, and like I had such power in my no that I never had before. Like I was always a people pleaser growing up and literally all the way through grad school. And as soon as I started living in alignment with nature and spending more time outside, suddenly I had conviction that I never had before.
Yeah.
It was palpable, remarkable.
Yeah.
Like I've noticed a huge difference because I was always somebody who would tiptoe around other people's feelings and not want to stir the pot. And suddenly, like, I had this fire that I didn't even know I had that, like, felt so good to embrace. And so I think when people start getting to that point through their own health and lifestyle optimization, and then we have an army of people who have conviction and have clarity around, what they're seeing, and an ability and a desire to speak their truth. That's when, we see real change can happen. And the thing with the decentralized system is that because it's decentralized inherently, it can't happen in a top-down fashion. So it has to take initiative at the individual level in order to pursue that, and then we can come together as a community to create something really great together. But I think, as Jack also mentions, with decentralized medicine, what that requires is that there may be a period of like trial and error where we have to figure things out, because essentially in a decentralized system, everything can come to the table. Like we're going to test everything. We're going to test, acupuncture and Chinese medicine and Ayurveda and allopathic medicine and, homeopathy and everything. All the systems can come to the table, and then we have to see what has proof of work. You got to test things out. Does it work? Doesn't it work? Are there harms? Are there benefits? Like, what does this look like as it starts to be implemented? And as you start iterating on that, things get weeded out. It's like, okay, this didn't work, so, we're going to focus on this thing that did work instead. That proof of work is completely missing in centralized medicine because we're basically force-fed this model and not given any other options unless we, individually pursue those options ourselves. We can't go to a doctor and be, kind of granted access to like a smorgasbord or like a panel of different options that we can choose from to see which resonates with us and what works for us. We are only given one option, and that's not going to work because people are different. People have, different lifestyles and different needs and wants and desires, and that has to be taken into account as well. And so it's definitely a bit challenging, but I think I already see it happening because we already have a really great community of doctors and practitioners and nurses and scientists that are all doing their part to further this research around like nature-based medicine and health and science, and understanding that like if we can build models around first principles and understanding how nature works, that we're ultimately going to figure out how our bodies work as well, because we're just a fractal of everything that's outside of us. And so if we can interrogate that with without bias, we can learn so much about how our systems are working and how to best act in the world to, lead a healthy and fulfilling life. So I think it's just kind of an iterative process that has to kind of happen organically. It can't really be orchestrated from a top-down level, but I already see the communities growing so much. And I've already been connected with so many great people that gives me a lot of hope. And I also am very excited to hopefully one day start a light research lab that's completely decentralized in its funding. So philanthropically funded, crowd-funded to support research that is really, like I was mentioning, nature-based, that's trying to understand how nature's working through a scientific lens. And so I look forward to hopefully creating that lab one day. And ideally, I would like to combine that lab with like a retreat center where basically people
Yes.
can come and we get all their like initial biomarkers and everything like that, and then we have them stay for like a week or 2 weeks, and we have them do all the things, the nutrition and the lifestyle and the light and everything.
Oh my
And
God,
then
that
we
would
like
be
take time points along the
incredible.
way. Like I know I would want that for myself, so I'm like, this would
I'm
be great.
there. You just tell me when and where I'm coming.
Yeah, so I would love to like have a branch somewhere in North America and then one maybe in El Salvador as well, so we can compare also like a more equatorial light environment to a more northern light environment. And then we can also do,
Amazing.
we can stratify by haplotype as well. We can have people go from one site to the other site and we can measure their changes. Like there's just so much that we can do that
Wow.
would not only be research, but it would also be directly improving people's lives as
Oh
well at
yeah.
the same time. So it's just kind of a win-win.
Wow, that is so inspirational. And in your new lab, we'll get some Bitcoiners, OG Bitcoiners that want to support you as
Heck
well.
yeah.
So I'm sure they're listening out there. Um, Dr. Sabine Hazen was on my podcast as well. She's a
Oh, I love
friend.
her.
She's amazing. And yeah, she also
Nice.
talks about how do we decentralize the science and the medical profession and community. Professor Ian Brighthope from Australia was also on the pod, and he also speaks the same language. There are so many great people. Doc Ahmed Malik in London. Like there's so many great people that have the same mindset
Yes.
that I really have hope from people like you guys wanting to build something else. You've dedicated so many years out of your life to learn how to help other people, and then you come to the realization that the way the system you are part of is so toxic, and it's counterintuitive for what people actually need. So you then start, I mean, I'm sure you didn't want that. I'm sure you didn't sign up for that. You just wanted to help people. But now you understand that not only you need to help people, but you also need to help build the system that
Mm-hmm.
this whole thing is a part of. So that's a way bigger task and role. But I guess also as Bitcoiners, we understand that about the financial system. Like once we get what kind of world we live in, we're like, oh, okay, I thought this is going to be easy and I'm just going to invest in Bitcoin and get some yield. But instead I understand I need to like fix the money, fix the world, right?
Gotta
It's a
work.
way bigger vision than that. So, I mean, I acknowledge you and every one of those amazing scientists that really have a new vision for how the medical world can look like and what the our health systems can look like. It's very important because, as you said, we are peak depopulation. Like
Mm.
it's happening, and we have to start acquiring new knowledge and new information, new education. Otherwise, we are going to go down with the current.
Mm-hmm.
So the work you're doing is amazing in that sense. Do I have room for two more questions before
Sure.
we wrap up? Okay. You mentioned when we did the panel back 6 months ago, you mentioned that you're going to New Hampshire to educate decision makers. Can you share how it was, and was there any good news out of there? Like, did they learn something new? What did they take out of it?
Yeah, so it went really well.
What was the purpose of this gathering?
So there were two different talks I did. One was to all of the superintendents in the state of New Hampshire, and the other one was to all the principals. And in both cases, I would say the audience was quite shocked and surprised by the information. I think they didn't really.
Principals of schools, right?
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
of like elementary, high schools,
Yes.
etc. In the
Uh-huh.
public school system.
Yep.
And I had a lot of people come up to me afterwards just saying how just blown away they were by the information and how much they wanted to implement that in their homes. And then, but also people mentioning the challenges of like implementing this in schools, because ever since COVID, there has been this huge push to digitalize the education process. And now, ever since COVID, the past 5 years, these kids have been on laptops, Chromebooks all day in school, and then of course they're on their screens when they're out of school too, and they're mostly indoors, and it's just a big problem.
Huge
And I
problem. Huge. My son's
huge
16. I see it. Like,
yes. Yeah, I have a stepson who's 14 and also like, but he's of course like light pilled and everything. So like he does good
Light
stuff.
filled. Oh, I love
Yeah.
it. Light filled. Oh,
So he's outside a ton, like doing sports and like wearing
yeah.
his blue blockers if he's on the computer, thank goodness. So, but anyways, there's this resistance to go back to the old analog way of doing things because the claim is that the data they're getting from this digitalization of education is helping them to curate a personalized education experience and assess attention span. And I made the point that by putting them on the screens, you're reducing their attention span and you're reducing their capacity to learn. So it's like a kind of a catch 22. And so, I think some administrators definitely resonated. I don't know how much, power they have over that at least, but I mean, I would at least hope. I haven't heard back from any of them specifically that they've made any changes, but I actually need to follow up with Frank, who's the guy who recruited me to speak there, to see if he's heard of anything or if anybody has done anything with the information. But at least I think at a personal level, people felt motivated to make changes, at least in the day. Maybe they forgot about it, but hopefully I'm living rent free in their brain somewhere that they're feeling a little guilty about staring at their screens at night or something.
And it's a crack in their consciousness, though. Like the more
Yeah.
they get exposed to that kind of information going forward, just like everything we're doing with Bitcoin, with any other topic, like you need the first person to say it to you, and then you'll hear it again and again, and something will work if it needs to work. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's amazing that you do that, and I think you need to keep educating health professionals and educators, because the children, like, this is the biggest hope we have, but it's also being indoctrinated with the content that they're learning, but also the
Yes.
setup, the way that schools are being set up is so horribly
It's
wrong. And we talked about antidepressants, but here it's with Ritalin and all the other drugs that they're giving kids.
yes.
It's crazy what's going on there.
It is. I mean, I believe I did a talk for there was an IMMH talk that I gave in September in San Diego, and I was listing some statistics there, but I believe the stat was like greater than 1 in 8 kids are on a stimulant drug like Ritalin or Adderall, and they're on anti-anxiety meds, antidepressant meds too, and like
One in
chronic
eight.
disease. Yeah, it's crazy.
Insane. I don't remember any kid that took it when I was in school. Like no one.
Exactly.
And now it's like it's insane. All right, Bitcoin, to end up on that note. What is Bitcoin for you, and how do you think it plugs into the bigger scheme of things in changing the world for the better in what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin kind of feels like a trap door almost out of a house that you're kind of locked in and against your will, let's say. It feels kind of like not a hack isn't the right word, but it's kind of a loophole that emerged that just it's a way to unplug from the system that is enslaving us, and that gives you both not only financial freedom, but also freedom of thought and autonomy as well, because it becomes very clear, and COVID was a perfect example. We already touched about that, where if you are financially incentivized to take a certain action and you're in a debt laden state where you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're most likely going to take that action, even if it goes against your personal beliefs and values. And so Bitcoin offers people an opportunity to choose for themselves and not rely on income from fiat in order to dictate what decisions they're going to make. And I think Kevin's also doing really great work in this department as well, as it relates to leveraging the technology of Bitcoin as it relates to science. Like he's basically kind of putting his publications, well, both he's putting them on Substack, I believe, so he's kind of decentralizing the publication process in that way and being able to publish earlier results to help
Yeah.
push things more quickly. But he's also tagging his findings onto the blockchain so that they're living there kind of ad infinitum, so that people will be able to reference that and not have to worry about the censorship issues that are very commonly present within the centralized journal model. So from a technology standpoint, leveraging the blockchain for science, I think, is going to be a really important thing coming up, especially if we see these trends continuing of like more suppression, more censorship. That this is, again, kind of like a trapdoor or a loophole to avoid that and to get the information out there in a way that, is democratized, and you don't have to worry about doing this important research and then actually not being able to reach the people who need it most. So I think when it comes to funding a lab as well, leveraging Bitcoin is going to be very important because, otherwise, let's say you're getting funded in fiat and that money can buy you less and less over time. So it's not efficient, right? Because you can buy equipment and then, you need to keep the lab going. It's a constant influx of cash needed, and that cash requirement goes up and up and up over time because of inflation. So if you can have an inherently deflationary currency supporting your lab, that's going to allow you to gain more wealth and use it more wisely and still have more capital to fall back on to do the important studies and to, pay potential subjects in your research studies as well, to be able to incentivize them to come in and also hopefully orange pill them as well, and just create this kind of economy where we're all supporting each other and we're all working towards a higher good versus like the race to the bottom that's currently happening. So I'm very encouraged by at BTC Prague, for example, like the spirit of the people there was just wonderful. Like I see so many like-minded people who are excited about building a future that is actually, worth fighting for and doing really cool things. And it also, like you said, you have hope talking to these scientists and doctors. That really gave me a ton of hope. And it makes me very excited to, continue the push forward and do the work to create the future that we deserve and that our children deserve.
We need you speaking in more Bitcoin conferences, Doc, and if you want that, I'm gonna help you get there.
I would love that.
Yeah, so we need to talk about that offline. How do I sign up to your book club? You mentioned that at one point.
Yeah, so everything, so there's a website called Thinkific where I host all my classes, my ebooks, and my book club is there as well. So basically, if you sign up, it's $15 a month. You get access to all of the recordings, which I think there's probably like 20 something at this point, where you can kind of self-guide through the body electric and through most of Cross Currents, where we actually have a call on Friday to continue through the last section of the book.
You do like live sessions for the ones that are already in the community, and the ones that join in can listen in and then continue attending live.
Yes. So when you sign up, you'll get a welcome email that has like the Zoom link that we use each time we meet, which is roughly twice a month. And then so you can join live for those sessions, and then you can go back and go through the library of the previous calls so that you can catch up. We do some watch parties as well. So sometimes we'll like watch podcasts and I'll like chime in with my 2 cents throughout the podcast. It's kind of fun.
I love it. Yeah.
And then I also have a currently live course that's called Quantum U that is basically taking kind of a Bachelor of Science in maybe biochemistry or biology and reworking it into a more decentralized framework. So we're basically learning, all the basic chemistry, organic chemistry, biology, developmental biology, genetics, biochemistry, all of these things. And I'm kind of weaving the decentralized nature-based science throughout. And then we're going to culminate in our lectures in quantum and circadian biology and mitochondrial biology. So it should be really fun. I mean, we're having a really good time. We're at lecture 8 or 9, I think now. We're meeting weekly roughly. And I think I've gotten really good feedback because a lot of people were very traumatized by their college and high school experiences, which I didn't necessarily realize, but so many people had these like self-defeating ideals around like, I'm not smart enough to learn math or science, and like they just had bad teachers. And so I feel like been quite a healing experience for some people is the feedback I've gotten, that they actually feel like it's clicking for the first time and that they can actually learn this and like use it productively. And I try to also weave like practical applications throughout as well so that you can put it into action and like see chemistry or biology in action, which really helps to anchor it in too. So
I love it.
Very fun. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. All right. How do you have time to do all of that? You actually prepare your lectures and you have your podcast and you go to places and you dance. How do you?
I don't have a single employee. I literally just do everything myself.
Oh my God, dude. I thought I am like, doing a lot, but you're something else. Amazing. Okay. So I'm going to put the link to your website and your Instagram and maybe your X here. Sure. I think Instagram is the best place to follow you, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then all the digital courses and the book club everything is accessible on your website.
Yes.
Anything else you want to tell people you want them to know?
I mean, we talked about
and one last question.
Okay.
Because I have international audience, like,
yeah.
Do you work with people from all over the world? Like, if they want to contact you directly and do some work remotely with you, or is it just the US that?
No, so it can be anywhere. I will say that I have something called brain rentals, where basically you can rent my brain for an hour, and then we can have a chat or go over labs or whatever it is. But I paused the brain rentals through the beginning of next year, which is also coming up. So probably in like February or March, I'll open them up again. So if people want to book one-on-one sessions with me, they can do that. And it can be anywhere in the world. We can figure out the time zones issue, and so that'll be available in a couple months again. Otherwise, the best way, you can DM me on Instagram or email me at dralexisjasmine@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you. I do get a lot of emails, so I will eventually get back to you. If I'm a little slow, I apologize. But so that's, the only thing I would say, that we talked about some products today, like different light bulbs and grounding products and stuff. But in my link in bio on Instagram and on X, there's like a list of products that I use and that I recommend. So if people want to start like harmonizing their indoor environments, they can check that out to find some good products and good brands that are aligned, that are doing good work, and that can help improve your health and life in general. So
it's a long list. It's a great list.
I have a holiday shopping guide that kind of condenses all of that into one document.
That's the document I got. It's amazing.
So that would be good for people to reference if they're just interested in different products and health and light biology and lymphatic support and all the things. So that's like kind of a good.
It's amazing that you provide all this valuable information for people. It's just such a beautiful mission.
I'm happy to do it. It makes me happy. I literally love my life so much. I'm so glad that I made the leap to, start my business in 2022. It was very stressful. I definitely oh my God, I'm not even going to get into it, but I had a lot of health issues. I was so stressed, but after finding Jack's work is when really things took off for me, and I really found my purpose, so to speak. And so ever since, April of 2023, really, things have just been on an upward trajectory, and I'm just so happy to be living my life and help people also live lives that they're in love with. It's just like the best feeling in the world, and I wouldn't want to do anything else.
And we're happy that you exist.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexis. I love this conversation. It was amazing. Me too. As I knew it would be. Thank you for being so generous with your time and your knowledge, and being so patient. I'm sure some of those things you've talked about them hundreds of times, and you still do it so beautifully.
No, I'm happy to.
You.
I'm happy to. I love talking about this stuff. What'd you say?
I said that you're a great teacher.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. And now, thank you everyone for being with us. Please give this a like and all that stuff you need to do in order for the algorithms to not kick us out. Thanks for being with us. Please take a minute to give this episode a like, a comment, and subscribe or follow. And please share it with your friends so they can also get value and choose to take some positive action in their lives. Till next time.